She made coffee for lawyers every morning, invisible in her apron and worn sneakers. They mocked her accent, tossed coins like she was begging, treated her like furniture that happened to serve espresso. But when a $50 million case hung in the balance and the city's top attorneys couldn't find the answer, she spoke up from behind the coffee machine. What she said in that moment didn't just shock the courtroom, it changed everything they thought they knew about who deserves a voice in justice. The marble floors of Whitmore and Associates gleamed like mirrors under crystal chandeliers, each step echoing power and prestige through halls lined with portraits of distinguished partners. At 26, this was the most elite law firm in Manhattan, where cases worth hundreds of millions were decided over handshakes and where the wrong tie could end a career before it started. Veronica Hayes moved through this temple of justice like a ghost, her coffee cart wheels squeaking softly against the polished stone. At 24, she had the kind of beauty that turned heads, dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, olive skin that glowed despite the fluorescent lights, and intelligent brown eyes that saw everything but were rarely seen in return. Her uniform was simple: black slacks, white shirt, small gold nameplate that most people never bothered to read. She'd worked here for 8 months, starting each day at 5 a.m. to brew the artisanal coffee that fueled the firm's relentless pursuit of victory. Colombian single origin for the senior partners, oat milk lattes for the associates trying to impress, Americanos black as midnight for the litigators preparing for war. But Veronica wasn't just any coffee girl. Hidden beneath her apron was a secret that could have changed everything, if anyone had bothered to ask. The morning started like every other. Veronica wheeled her cart past the conference rooms where lawyers prepared for the biggest case of the decade, Henderson versus Maritime Industries, a $50 million lawsuit that had dominated headlines for months. Through the glass walls, she could see the legal dream team: senior partner Victoria Sterling, known for her ice-cold demeanor and $1,000 suits; associate director Marcus Thompson, Harvard Law's golden boy who'd never lost a case; and junior partner Amanda Chen, the firm's rising star who worked 18-hour days to prove she belonged. They were losing. Veronica had heard the whispered conversations, the panic in Victoria's voice during late-night phone calls, the way Marcus had started drinking his coffee black, a sure sign of stress. The case hinged on a maritime law precedent from 1987 that could either make Henderson Industries pay for the environmental disaster they'd caused or let them walk away clean. The problem was simple: they couldn't find it. "Another dead end," Victoria was saying as Veronica set down her triple espresso. "3 weeks of research and we're nowhere closer to finding that precedent. If we don't locate the Kellerman ruling by tomorrow, we lose everything." Marcus loosened his tie, exhaustion written across his features. "I've had 6 researchers working around the clock: Harvard Law Library, Yale's archives, even the Library of Congress. It's like the case never existed." Amanda looked up from her laptop, eyes red from staring at screens. "Maybe it doesn't. Maybe Henderson's legal team made it up to throw us off track." Victoria's laugh was sharp, brittle. "David Henderson doesn't play games. If his lawyers say there's a precedent, there's a precedent. We just have to find it before Judge Morrison rules." Veronica's hand paused on the coffee pot. She knew that case. She'd read about the Kellerman ruling during her 3rd year at Columbia Law, back when she still believed she'd become a lawyer herself, before her father's medical bills and her mother's depression had forced her to drop out and take whatever job would pay the rent. But she said nothing. Coffee girls didn't interrupt senior partners. Coffee girls stayed invisible. The day wore on, tension thick as smoke in the conference room. Veronica brought fresh cups every hour, watching the legal titans slowly crumble under pressure. She'd seen it before: brilliant minds reduced to panic when they couldn't find what they needed. It was almost poetic. All that power, all that privilege, undone by a single missing piece of information. By 3 p.m., the mood had shifted from frustrated to desperate. "We need to consider a settlement," Marcus was saying, his voice heavy with defeat. $50 million is better than nothing." "Absolutely not," Victoria snapped. "I didn't spend 15 years building this reputation to fold on the biggest case of my career." "There has to be another angle." Amanda pulled up another database on her laptop. "What if we approach it from admiralty law instead of environmental? Maybe there's something in the shipping regulations that, quote—" "We've tried that," Victoria interrupted. We've tried everything. Face it, we're screwed. That's when Veronica spoke up. Excuse me. Her voice was quiet, almost apologetic, cutting through the heated discussion like a knife through silk. All three lawyers turned, surprise flickering across their faces. They weren't used to interruptions from the help. I'm sorry, Veronica continued, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. I couldn't help overhearing. Are you looking for Kellerman versus Pacific Maritime from 1987? Victoria's eyebrow arched, her expression somewhere between amused and annoyed. I beg your pardon? Veronica swallowed hard, knowing she was crossing a line that could get her fired. The case you're looking for. It wasn't filed under Kellerman. It was filed under Kellerman Reynolds, and it wasn't Pacific Maritime Industries. It was Pacific Maritime Holdings, LLC. That's why your searches aren't pulling it up. The room fell silent. Marcus's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. Amanda's fingers stopped typing. Victoria leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. And how exactly would you know that? Veronica's cheeks flushed, but she held her ground. I studied it in law school. The case was about oil tanker regulations in international waters. The ruling established that parent companies are liable for environmental damage caused by their subsidiaries, even if the subsidiary was operating under a different flag of convenience. Law school? Marcus set down his cup with a sharp clink. You went to law school? Columbia, Veronica admitted quietly. I was supposed to graduate 2 years ago, but she trailed off, not wanting to explain about her father's cancer diagnosis or the crushing debt that had forced her to choose between her dreams and her family's survival. Amanda recovered first, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Kellerman Reynolds versus Pacific Maritime Holdings. She hit enter, waited, then gasped. Holy shit, she's right. Here it is. 1987, Second Circuit Court of Appeals. The ruling says, she paused, reading quickly. Parent company liability extends to all offshore operations, regardless of subsidiary structure or flag registration. Victoria stared at Veronica like she was seeing her for the first time. This is exactly what we need. This ruling makes Henderson Industries directly liable for the disaster, even though it was technically caused by their Bahamian subsidiary. Marcus was already reaching for his phone. I'll call Judge Morrison's clerk and request an extension to file additional briefs. But Victoria held up a hand, her gaze never leaving Veronica. Wait. She stood, walked around the table, and stopped directly in front of the coffee cart. What's your full name? Veronica Hayes. Veronica Hayes, Victoria repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. Columbia Law. What year? I would have been class of 2023. Would have been, but you left. It wasn't a question. Victoria Sterling hadn't built her reputation by missing details. Yes, ma'am. Why? Veronica hesitated. The truth felt too personal, too raw to share with these polished strangers who lived in a world where family problems were solved with money and connections. But something in Victoria's expression, not kindness exactly, but a sharp professional interest, made her answer honestly. My father was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The treatment wasn't covered by insurance, and my mom couldn't work because she needed to take care of him. I had to make a choice. And you chose family over your career. I chose family over everything. Victoria nodded slowly. How much debt did you take on for his treatment? Veronica's stomach clenched. She didn't want pity from these people. That's not really relevant to... How much? The command in Victoria's voice was unmistakable. This wasn't a request. About $200,000, Veronica said quietly. He lived 18 months longer than the doctors predicted. It was worth it. Was? He passed last year. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus looked uncomfortable. Amanda stared at her laptop screen, and Victoria just watched Veronica with those calculating eyes. Finally, Victoria spoke. The Kellerman ruling you just cited, that's not basic law school material. That's specialized maritime law, probably mentioned in passing in one lecture. You'd have to have been paying very close attention to remember it, let alone recall the specific details about the name discrepancy. Veronica said nothing. What was there to say? Which means, Victoria continued, you weren't just a good student. You were exceptional. Top of your class, probably. Law review, maybe? Managing editor of the Columbia Law Review, Veronica admitted reluctantly. But that was a long time ago. Victoria smiled then. Not the cold, professional smile she wore in court, but something genuine and sharp as a blade. 2 years ago, that's not long at all. She turned to her colleagues. Marcus, Amanda, I need to speak with Ms. Hayes privately. Give us the room. They left without question, though Marcus shot Veronica a look that might have been respect or might have been confusion. When the door clicked shut, Victoria gestured to one of the leather chairs around the conference table. Sit. Veronica perched on the edge of the chair, still holding her coffee pot like a shield. Let me tell you what's going to happen, Victoria said, settling into her own chair with the predatory grace of a woman who'd never lost a battle. Tomorrow, we're going to walk into that courtroom and present the Kellerman-Reynolds ruling. We're going to win this case, and Henderson Industries is going to pay every penny they owe. But more importantly, you're going to help us prepare our arguments. Veronica blinked. I don't understand. Starting right now, you're not the coffee girl anymore. You're a legal researcher. Temporary position, pending the outcome of this case. If we win, and we will, we'll discuss something more permanent. I can't afford to quit my job. I have bills, payments. The research position pays $4,000 a week, win or lose. Veronica's mouth fell open. $4,000 was more than she made in 2 months serving coffee. But I don't have a degree. I never passed the bar. You don't need a degree to do research. And frankly, you just proved you know more maritime law than most of the graduates I've hired. The question is, do you want this opportunity, or do you want to spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been? That night, Veronica stayed late in the firm's library, surrounded by case files and legal texts. She hadn't felt this alive in 2 years, not since she'd walked away from everything she'd worked for. Her mind moved through the law like it was coming home, connecting precedents and finding patterns that others had missed. She wasn't just researching the Kellerman ruling. She was building an entire framework of maritime law that would make Henderson's guilt undeniable. Victoria found her there at midnight, slumped over a desk covered with yellow legal pads filled with notes. You should go home, Victoria said, though her tone suggested she was impressed rather than concerned. Veronica looked up, blinking tired eyes. I think I found something else. The Kellerman ruling isn't the only precedent we can use. There's Morrison versus Atlantic Shipping from 1994 and Chen versus Global Maritime from 2001. If we link all 3 cases together, we can establish a pattern of parent company liability that goes back decades. Victoria moved closer, scanning the pages of notes. Show me. For the next hour, they worked side by side, building legal arguments with the precision of architects designing a skyscraper. Victoria asked sharp questions, pushed back on weak points, demanded excellence in every line of reasoning. It was like being back in law school, but better. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This was real. You know, Victoria said as they finally packed up for the night, I've been practicing law for 20 years. I've worked with Harvard grads, Yale grads, Stanford grads. Most of them are smart enough, dedicated enough, but very few of them have what you have. What's that? Hunger. You want this, not the money, not the prestige, but the work itself. You love the law the way some people love music or art. It shows in everything you do. Veronica felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. I thought I'd lost that. When I had to leave school, I thought maybe I was never meant to be a lawyer after all. Bullshit, Victoria said bluntly. You were meant to be a lawyer the way sharks are meant to swim. The only question is whether you're ready to stop making excuses and start making moves. The next morning, the courtroom was packed. Henderson Industries had brought an army of lawyers in $1,000 suits, their confidence radiating like heat from expensive cologne. The media filled the gallery, cameras rolling, reporters taking notes. This was the kind of case that made or broke careers. Veronica sat at the prosecution table, wearing a borrowed suit that Victoria had insisted she take from the firm's emergency wardrobe. She looked professional, polished, like she belonged, but her heart was hammering against her ribs. Judge Morrison called the court to order, and the Henderson team presented their case first. It was smooth, professional, confident. They argued that their client couldn't be held responsible for actions taken by an independent subsidiary operating under foreign jurisdiction. The precedent they cited seemed ironclad. Then it was Victoria's turn. She stood with the kind of presence that commanded attention, her voice clear and strong as she began to dismantle Henderson's defense piece by piece. She presented the Kellerman-Reynolds ruling first, explaining how it established parent company liability in exactly this type of situation. But she didn't stop there. She built on it with Morrison versus Atlantic Shipping, showing a pattern of court decisions that held parent companies accountable for environmental damage. Then came Chen versus Global Maritime, which specifically addressed the flag of convenience loophole that Henderson was trying to exploit. One by one, Victoria demolished their arguments with surgical precision. But the moment that changed everything came when she turned to address the court's questions about the complexity of maritime law research. Your Honor, Victoria said, the legal framework we presented today represents hundreds of hours of research through archives that most law libraries don't maintain. The precedents we've cited were located not by our senior associates or our computer databases, but by a researcher who understood that sometimes the most important cases are the ones that have been forgotten or misnamed. She paused, turning slightly to look at Veronica. That researcher is sitting at our table today. Ms. Veronica Hayes, who identified the key precedent while overhearing our discussions and who spent last night building the legal framework that proves Henderson Industries' liability beyond any reasonable doubt. The courtroom stirred. Henderson's lawyers exchanged glances. In the gallery, reporters leaned forward. Ms. Hayes, Judge Morrison said, would you stand, please? Veronica rose on unsteady legs, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes on her. Ms. Sterling tells me you identified the Kellerman-Reynolds precedent from memory. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. And you studied this case where? Columbia Law School, Your Honor. Professor Martinez's Advanced Maritime Law Seminar, Spring Semester 2021. Judge Morrison nodded thoughtfully. It's unusual to see such detailed recall of case law from a student who didn't complete her degree. May I ask why you left law school? Veronica glanced at Victoria, who gave her an almost imperceptible nod. Family illness, Your Honor. Medical expenses. I had to make a choice between finishing my education and taking care of my father. I see. Judge Morrison's expression softened slightly. And what have you been doing since then? This was the moment, the truth that could either validate everything or expose her as the imposter she sometimes felt like. I've been working as a barista at this law firm, Your Honor, serving coffee and trying to pay off my father's medical debt. The courtroom was silent. Henderson's lead attorney looked like he'd swallowed something unpleasant. In the gallery, a reporter's pen moved frantically across her notepad. Ms. Hayes, Judge Morrison said, in my 30 years on the bench, I've seen many lawyers make brilliant arguments, but I've never seen anyone turn coffee service into legal research. Your work on this case shows not just knowledge, but dedication to justice that goes beyond personal ambition. He turned to the Henderson legal team. In light of the precedents presented by Ms. Sterling's team, precedents that your researchers failed to locate despite significantly more resources, this court finds Henderson Industries liable for the full environmental damages sought by the plaintiffs. Judgment in the amount of $57 million, plus court costs and attorney fees. The gavel came down like thunder. The courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed toward the exits, phones already dialing their editors. Henderson's lawyers began the grim process of packing their briefcases. Victoria was immediately surrounded by congratulations and handshakes from colleagues and clients. But she broke away from the crowd and walked directly to Veronica, who was still standing in shock. How does it feel to win your first case? Victoria asked. I didn't win anything, Veronica said quietly. You did all the arguing. You built the presentation. Veronica, Victoria's voice was firm, you found the case that won this trial. You built the legal framework that made our arguments bulletproof. You turned 8 months of serving coffee into the most important victory of my career. Don't you dare minimize that. She handed Veronica an envelope. Your research fee for the week, plus a bonus for exceptional work. Veronica opened it and gasped. The check was for $20,000. But you said 4,000. I said the research position paid 4,000 a week. I didn't say anything about bonuses for winning $57 million cases. Before Veronica could respond, Victoria continued, I have a proposition for you. The firm will pay for you to finish law school, Columbia if you want to go back, or Harvard if you want a change of scenery. Full tuition, living expenses, and a guaranteed position here when you graduate. In exchange, you work here part-time during school as a legal researcher. Veronica stared at her, hardly believing what she was hearing. Why? Why would you do that? Because talent like yours shouldn't be wasted serving coffee. Because you've already proven you can out-research lawyers with 10 times your experience. And because, Victoria paused, her professional mask slipping slightly, because I started my career as a secretary in a law firm. I know what it's like to be invisible, to have people assume you don't matter because of what you do instead of who you are. She held out her hand. So what do you say? Ready to stop serving justice and start practicing it? Veronica looked at the offered handshake, then at the courtroom around her, the polished wood, the flags, the portraits of judges who had shaped the law. 6 months ago, she'd thought this world was closed to her forever. She'd thought she was destined to watch from the sidelines while other people fought the battles that mattered. Now she realized the truth. She'd never been on the sidelines at all. She'd been preparing. Yes, she said, taking Victoria's hand. I'm ready. 2 years later, Veronica Hayes graduated summa cum laude from Columbia Law School. She passed the New York bar exam on her first try, scoring in the top 5%. And when she walked into Whitmore and Associates as a first-year associate, not the coffee girl, but a lawyer, the first thing she did was buy a round of coffee for everyone in the office. But this time, she bought it as an equal. The local news picked up the story, from barista to bar exam, how one woman's legal knowledge changed everything. It went viral on social media, inspiring thousands of people who had given up on their dreams to reconsider what was possible. Veronica kept the story simple in interviews. Sometimes opportunity comes disguised as just another day at work. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is speak up when you know something that matters. And sometimes the person who can save the day is the one nobody expected. But privately, she knew the real lesson was different. She hadn't succeeded despite being the coffee girl. She'd succeeded because being the coffee girl had taught her to listen, to observe, to understand how the world really worked. She'd learned more about law by watching lawyers fail than she ever would have learned in a classroom. Today, Veronica Hayes is a partner at Sterling and Associates. Victoria renamed the firm after her mentor retired. She specializes in environmental law and has never lost a case involving corporate environmental damage. She still makes her own coffee every morning, not because she has to, but because it reminds her of where she came from. And sometimes when she sees the cleaning staff or the food service workers moving through the firm's marble hallways like ghosts, she stops and asks them about their day. You never know who might be listening. You never know who might have exactly what you need. And you never know whose dreams are just waiting for someone to believe in them.